Somewhere in a locked government server room, there are files that were never meant to reach your screen. Some of them have already leaked out. Others are still being reviewed, redacted, and slowly released, one batch at a time. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why governments around the world are suddenly talking about this in public. Before we go further, hit that subscribe button right now, because what you are about to hear connects military pilots, CIA archives, missing scientists, and a sitting president, all in the same story. This is not a conspiracy theory channel. Everything here comes from official documents, congressional hearings, and statements made on record. Stay with me until the end, because the last few minutes will genuinely surprise you. In February 2026, President Donald Trump publicly directed the Department of Defense to begin identifying and releasing government files connected to alien life, unidentified aerial phenomena, and UFOs. This was not a vague promise made once and forgotten. A new system was actually built for it, called the Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters, or PURSUE. It went live in May 2026, and it has been publishing real declassified material ever since. The naming here matters more than people realize. Around the same time, the Department of Defense itself was officially rebranded as the Department of War through an executive order signed the previous year. Choosing to launch a UFO transparency project through a department now associated with war footing rather than quiet diplomacy sent its own message. It told the public that this subject was finally being treated as serious national security business, not late-night entertainment. The files are not sitting on some obscure corner of the internet either. They are published through a dedicated government portal, separate from the older Pentagon Anomaly Office website, specifically built for this rolling release. Defense officials have said the files go through a review and declassification process before anything is posted. That process is slow, sometimes frustratingly so, but it is happening in full public view for the first time in modern history. The first batch dropped on May 8, 2026, and it was not small. It included reports, photographs, videos, witness accounts, military records, and even astronaut transcripts. Some of the material dated back to the 1940s, while other files were recent. Officials described this as only the beginning of a rolling disclosure process. 6 former defense officials and researchers told reporters this first release was historic, even if it was incomplete. One board member from a transparency organization said the release proved something important. The government had been collecting UAP data and receiving reports for decades, while withholding much of it from the public. That fact alone, he said, was no longer deniable. Then came the second batch, followed by a third release on June 12, 2026. This one included 53 documents, 10 images, 6 videos, and 3 audio recordings from the CIA, FBI, NASA, and the Department of Defense. The videos showed strange orb-like objects moving across the sky. Several documents described encounters reported by federal law enforcement agents in 2023, who described glowing orbs on the horizon in broad daylight. One of the strangest details came from a report signed by Dr. John Kozlowski, director of the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. His report described an orange object, nicknamed a mother orb, that appeared to launch smaller red orbs. According to that same report, roughly 40% of all reported phenomena still have no reasonable explanation. That number alone is enough to make anyone pause. But not everything in these files points towards something otherworldly. One CIA document from 1992 admitted that secret U-2 and Oxcart spy plane test flights accounted for more than half of all UFO reports during the late 1950s and 1960s. The same document revealed that the government's old Project Blue Book program gave the public false explanations, specifically to protect those classified test flights. So some of history's most famous UFO sightings may have simply been top-secret aircraft, hidden behind a story built to mislead the public. There is another disturbing detail buried deep in the historical files. Back in 1952 and 1953, the CIA convened a group called the Scientific Advisory Panel on Unidentified Flying Objects. That panel concluded flying saucers posed no direct physical threat to the country. But it also recommended something far more telling: an official policy of deliberately debunking UFO reports, specifically to strip the subject of its mystery in the public eye. In other words, decades before anyone used the phrase government cover-up, the government itself was already writing the plan for one. Yet other cases in the files resist any simple explanation. A 2022 report from Colorado Springs describes a potato-shaped object, painted in a strange, creamy, opalescent color, hovering silently near a sensitive military site. A much older CIA report from 2008 describes a disc-shaped object with rotating lights hovering above an airport in Zimbabwe, an incident serious enough to be relayed straight to the White House Situation Room. Nobody involved at the time could confirm whether it belonged to a foreign government or something else entirely. Cases like these are exactly why the disclosure movement refuses to stay quiet. This push for transparency has now reached the halls of Congress. At a recent disclosure forum in Washington, lawmakers from both parties discussed reviving a proposed UAP Disclosure Act designed to protect whistleblowers who come forward with classified information. One representative said she is working directly with the White House on a possible amnesty program for people who claim knowledge of recovered non-human technology or biological material. A former Pentagon analyst suggested this could even take the form of a presidential executive order. The pressure is not limited to Washington either. State-level lawmakers have started holding their own sessions on the topic. Pennsylvania's House Communications and Technology Committee, for example, held a public hearing where two well-known former Pentagon officials and a Penn State astrophysicist testified about the current state of UAP research. Separately, a member of the House Oversight Committee revealed that MIT's Lincoln Laboratory agreed to hand over a recording of a UFO briefing that scientists received from the Air Force more than 70 years ago. Old secrets, it seems, are finally being pried loose from every direction at once. Why would whistleblower protection even be necessary? Because according to several speakers at that same forum, more than a dozen researchers, scientists, and contractors connected to UAP-related work have died or disappeared under unusual circumstances over roughly the past 5 years. Observers are divided on whether these cases are truly connected to each other. But the pattern itself has become disturbing enough that a former presidential economic advisor publicly warned it could damage trust in entire industries and financial markets. Meanwhile, the scientific community is stepping directly into this story. Harvard physicist Avi Loeb announced he is now leading a brand new UAP Science Advisory Council, created to give the government expert guidance on these investigations. Loeb has said it is still too early to settle on any single explanation, given how limited and low quality much of the public data remains. His argument is simple: real science requires funding, patience, and attention to strange anomalies rather than social media noise. Loeb has floated some genuinely wild scientific possibilities in his public writing. He has pointed to a theory from physicist Hal Puthoff, suggesting some UAP could be propelled through manipulations of space-time itself, similar to a theoretical warp drive. If an object like that ever passed near Earth, Loeb argues its gravitational signature might actually be detectable by existing observatories built to catch ripples in space-time from colliding black holes. It sounds like science fiction, until you remember it is being proposed by a tenured Harvard professor now advising the Pentagon directly. Public opinion on this topic is remarkably united. A June 2026 national survey found strong bipartisan agreement that the government should be more transparent about what it knows. That same survey found people trust independent scientists far more than the federal government to explain what is actually happening. In a country as politically divided as this one, that kind of agreement is extremely rare. So where does this actually leave us? The files released through Pursue have already been viewed more than 1.5 billion times since May 2026, according to figures shared by researchers tracking the program. That number alone tells you this is not a fringe interest anymore. It has become one of the most watched government transparency stories in modern history. There are really only two possibilities being seriously discussed by officials and scientists. The first is that these are advanced, human-made technologies, possibly belonging to rival nations testing next-generation aircraft or drones near sensitive military sites. The second, far more startling possibility is that some of this data points towards something that did not originate on Earth at all. Nobody in an official capacity has confirmed either answer, and that uncertainty is exactly what is fueling the entire disclosure movement. What is certain is that this story is not finished. More files are scheduled to be reviewed and released on a rolling basis in the months ahead. Congress is actively debating new protections for the people who may be holding the most sensitive information. Whatever comes next, it will not stay behind closed doors for much longer. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what is really happening behind the scenes, make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next release when it drops. Drop a comment below telling me which theory you find more convincing, advanced human technology or something we cannot yet explain. Share this video with someone who still thinks this topic is just internet noise. We will keep tracking every new file the moment it becomes public, so stay close.